Let's talk some Florida Gator recruiting because names are coming off the board. It's commitment season, and the Gators are about to get some of their own. Let's bring in Corey Bender, Gators Online. Corey, Desmond Green out of South Carolina, massive interior offensive lineman, is going to commit on Thursday, tomorrow, depends when you're watching this. Is this going to be the start of a run for the Gators when it comes to commitments?
Yeah, Josh, I believe so. Georgia was a school that was positioned near the top for a while. Florida, they've hosted them about a handful of times over the last 2 years, but it was at OV a few weekends ago that really kind of catapulted Florida really towards the top of the list. South Carolina is an in-state school. That was the most recent OV. Oklahoma's in the mix as well. But this decision is supposed to be coming down to Florida and Georgia. And from speaking with multiple sources, confidence is high in Gainesville, and that's been the case for a few weeks now. We were monitoring the South Carolina OV to see if that could have any twist, down the stretch. But it should be coming down to the Dogs and Gators. And as of right now, heading into the home stretch, we definitely like where Florida stands. And if that is the case, that'd be their fifth offensive line commit, and that's how many they plan to sign this cycle. So it obviously would be a very strong group for the Gators up front.
Yeah, and then the run starts. I mean, we're going to see a massive amount of commitments from around the end of June through the middle of July. And on July 2nd, we got five-star wide receiver Sedarian Morgan, who's out of the state of Alabama, but has been saying some really good things about the Gators. How you feeling right now about a potential five-star wide receiver addition?
Yeah, obviously, Josh. I mean, Florida loves him. They picture him as a big play threat, kind of like a high school version of Kelvin Johnson. They like him as that mismatch problem. But as of right now, when he came off the OV, he said Florida was in his top two. It was a major impression that really put Florida into a different tier as far as top groups. But at the same time, he comes from a household group of Alabama Crimson Tide fans. He has some family members that like Auburn as well. So I think the biggest hurdle for Florida, and I said this for weeks, was Florida getting an OV before those schools. So he went to Florida, and then after that, he went to Alabama and Auburn. So as of right now, never say never. We know that in recruiting, NIL, I know Florida's really prioritizing him from that angle as well. But I think just with Alabama being so familiar in that house, them being one of the most recent OVs, I'm leaning towards the Crimson Tide, but I know Florida's still fighting. They have about a handful of staff members constantly recruiting this kid, and obviously he's a major priority. But as of right now, I'm thinking Morgan stays closer to home, back home in near Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, going to be a tough pull. Never going to be easy to pull a five-star out of the state of Alabama, but I think
Never,
it
yeah.
is doable. Who else we got committing here soon? We got Calvin Russell, Miami Northwestern wide receiver, very popular name here on this channel. We talk about him a lot, but the Gators are trying to keep him in state. So are the Canes. Where do you see Florida right now in all of this?
Yeah, this is another situation, Josh, where Florida got an OV back on May 16th. They're one of the first schools to get an OV, but after that, I mean, Michigan, Miami, I mean, the list goes on and on. He's been officially visiting a lot of schools, North Carolina. I think that's been a tough part, but again, it's kind of the same situation with Sedarian Morgan. He's 6'5", 6'6". Billy Gonzalez, a receivers coach. He loves those big body wide receivers, and Russell fits right into that mold. And Russell's near the top of the big board. I think Florida has a better shot than what many people might believe, especially after him OVing a bunch of other schools after Florida. But as of right now, I kind of picture Florida as kind of like the number 3 school, somewhere between 2 and 4. And I mean, never say never. I mean, it's another kid where Florida could surprise people over these final weeks. But as of right now, I have him going elsewhere. But Florida's definitely still putting up a strong fight for him to keep him in the Sunshine State.
How about Coco cornerback CJ Hester? He's going to make that decision in early July. Great length, 6'1", 175. Is he one that Gators are going to keep in state?
I think so, Josh. I put an RPM pick for him back in April. Florida's been trending for him off and on, even back last fall when they had different secondary staff. Florida was on top. They've been the most consistent. He loves the culture in Gainesville. And, Florida recently got CJ Brana, another in-state cornerback, and obviously adding the other CJ, as in CJ Hester. That'd be, that'd be a huge deal for secondary coach Deron Wilson. Those are two guys near the top of the board. He was at Iowa this past weekend, and I spoke to him earlier this week, and he actually took a step back and said, hey, Florida's not my number one. I have all schools tied right now. Meaning he said he can see himself at Iowa. He loved it up there. He thinks he can play early. Georgia's another school that's very high on his list, along with Syracuse. But from speaking with sources close to the situation, optimism is still high in Gainesville. We still think Florida wins out next week. It was supposed to be July 1st, first commitment, but it could be the 1st or the 3rd. either way, Hester will be off the board next week, and we're definitely leaning towards the Gators winning out for that one.
All right. Hezzy Kent, he's a real intriguing name. He goes 6'6", 285 pounds. Some teams like him as a tight end. Some teams feel he's already grown into an offensive tackle. He's going to make his commitment right here on the On3 Recruits channel on July 12th. Is Florida the favorite heading into this one?
Yeah, Josh, I think Florida right now, that's where I'm leaning. They've been the most consistent, I would say, even dating back to last cycle when the 2025 class was in the spotlight. When we got visitors list, he was always one of those underclassmen that kept popping up on the visitors list. And so Florida's been putting a lot of work with him. They like him at tight end. I think it's one of those kids that doesn't want to hear offensive tackle. He's one of those guys that wants to strictly be a tight end, and he has the stats to back it up. But when you look at him now, he's a massive kid. I know from hearing from other OVs, he actually measuring close to 300 pounds. He's a big kid. He carries weight fairly well. But right now, Florida and Miami have been the schools buzzing the most over the last probably 6 months or so. But Miami recently got another tight end commit. Texas the same way, and then I think Florida State did too. Those are all schools in the mix. But Florida, from what we've been told the past week or two, is very confident in this recruitment. And later on in July, I think he would. We're leaning towards him being the second commitment in the class at tight end, and obviously he's a major priority for Russ Callaway and Billy Napier. So that'd be a big deal if they can close.
All right, two more monsters on that defensive line I want to talk to you about. Both are in state, and both are going to be really hard to keep in state. We're talking James J.J. Johnson on the defensive line. We're talking edge Trenton Henderson out of Pensacola. What do you think? Any shot that Florida could land them both?
Yeah, so with Johnson, Florida's hosting more than anyone. And, I know last fall, Florida was telling this kid that we want you more than anything. Like, he was a major priority. Now he's on three's number one defensive lineman. So obviously their eval kind of turned out well. He had a great OV, but, Florida's kind of simmered here a little bit. They got him on campus so much early on. I really liked where they stood, but it was back in the early spring where Georgia kind of went to the top of the list. Texas has been in the mix too. I just feel like Florida hasn't really been able to regain that momentum that they had early on in the process. They definitely, I think, improved their standing a few weekends ago, and it's a guy they're going to push for until the very end. But I think as of right now, I think some other schools like Georgia and Texas are probably ahead of Florida for James Johnson. But Trenton Henderson, on the other hand, Florida made a really big move for him a few weeks ago. Going into his OV, LSU was on top, and then Florida actually, leapfrogged LSU and went to the top. And then Texas got him on campus this past weekend. And now, he's moved up his commitment date. He was one of those kids after his Florida OV. He said, hey, I could commit at any time. But initially said he wanted to kind of take it into the fall and see some game visits. But right now it's looking really good for Florida. I put an RPM pick after his Florida OV. I know Florida feels really good on that end. They feel like they've checked a lot of boxes for him. When it comes to these high-profile recruitments, conversations heat up more and more over the final 48 hours. But I think Florida, I'm definitely leaning Florida for Henderson. And that'd be a huge pickup, man, because they need kind of another high-profile edge, a young guy they can bring into this program. And I think as of a month or two ago, Florida was always a top school for him, but they were always kind of that tier two. There were schools ahead of Florida. So for the Gators to make this big of a move over a short period of time is a big deal. And if they can get this done, which I think they will, they'll land one of the top overall prospects in the Sunshine State and obviously Trenton Henderson.
Yeah, it is really getting exciting right now in Gainesville, Florida. Gator recruiting is heating up. So Gator fans, make sure you guys are subscribed to the On3 Recruits channel. Also, go check out gatorsonline.com.